So in my first tutorial of 2024, I want to do some renders of this Logitech mouse. Now, I am going to basically go on a whim, but what I just want to show you today is the lighting and doing this lighting. So I've got this Lookdev scene here. When I buy a model, I usually do Lookdev on it. A lot of artists do this. You can see this process on my Patreon and my products masterclass course if you want to go check that out. And I'm going to go over the scene here and then take it into a new scene and just do some cool lighting and make a really, really slick render in as short a time as possible. This model is from Turbo Squid. I will link it in the resources for the tutorial, so you can go and purchase that. I think it was about $30. So we're going to keep this super, super simple. If we look at some of the renders I've been making here, and we've got these Lookdev scenes, and we're going to try and expand on this a little bit, but usually I do this Lookdev here, and then I take that model and take it into scenes like this and start making scenes like this. So if you want to see tutorials on scenes like this, I can definitely do that. But for now, we're just going to focus on making this look nice. First things first, in this scene, I have a couple of different takes, one for a cloner, one for the mouse on its own. If I come back up to the main take, there's not really a whole lot going on here. If I come into the material, really, really basic material setup, not a whole lot going on. You've got your specular, your roughness, your normal. There is a bump map that came with the model. I didn't plug it in because it was a little bit too bumpy for me and I wanted a lot of smoothness. And even with the diffuse map, there's a lot of these tiling patterns that are coming in. So even with that, I decreased the power of that a little bit to, you know, something like 0.6. And then I actually increased the gamma a little bit as well. Now that did decrease the visibility of some of the buttons, but I wanted a smoother look, so that's what I went for. Right now, I'm just going to work with it pretty close to default. You know, we can maybe do like 0.8 here. We'll work with that because this looks fine just now. So that's all I really did, and then threw some lights around the model. And that was pretty much it for Lookdev. So we're going to kind of use this setup. So if you purchase this model and you follow along with this model, then that's the texture setup. And what I'm going to do is take this into a new scene and get to work. So with the model in a new scene, first thing I'm going to do is lock the live viewer and switch to path tracing. And I'm going to drop in a texture environment. I'm going to turn off this top dot, which is going to turn it off in the viewport, and I'm going to set it to black. Another thing I actually forgot to mention going over the material is this emission map, and that's going into a black body emission on quite a low power. You could be getting away with that on 10, and I might even change the color of it during this render. Try something in a slightly different color. So next up, we'll go to Objects, Octane camera tag. We'll drop in that camera. We'll go to the X, we'll 0, press tab, 0 the Y, tab, 0 the rotation, and now our camera is dead center. Let's change the focal length to something like 150, and then come into the camera and move back. So we're full frame, and then you see me doing this in my tutorials before, is if you middle mouse click, you get these 4 views. You can also get them by pressing this button up here, or F1, F2, F3, F4. I like to go to F2, camera's perspective, then do N, brings up this menu, then A, and then filter and work plane, because I don't like the work plane, it's kind of annoying. And then we've got 2 views, and the Octane is referencing this first view, as you can see here by the Octane camera. So now we can kind of work and move about and move our lights, and everything's still fine. So next up, we're going to go switch this to Octane, and we'll do 248 by 248. And then let's go to Objects, Lights, Octane Area Light, right click on it, Animation Tags, Target. I'm going to target that mouse, and I'm going to drag off to the side here. And I'm going to hold Control, and I'm going to drag one underneath. I'm going to highlight those area light tags, visibility, camera visibility, shadow visibility. Now we've got some lights. Now next up, I'm going to change the name of this to BG. I'm going to drop in a HDRI environment. Same thing, turn it off in the viewport. And I'm going to make this a bit bigger for you. Image texture, and I'm going to drop in a Studio HDRI. I like to do this. I'll drop in this one. This is like my go-to for most things, apparently. Drop in these Studio HDRIs, and if I turn off the lights here, we need to set this top one to visible environment, which means that we're seeing the black background, but we're working off of this one. I like to use this to fill in a lot of light, and you know, takes a little bit of weight off of us, and means that we can leave a little bit of randomness in the way everything's being lit. And I like to do this just to fill things in a nice way, and then you complement that with the lights. I feel like that creates a nice look. So, what I'm going to make here, we're just going to try and get really, really slick looking render. So, we'll maybe put the mouse in some sort of position. I mean, that looks quite cool. We could almost do some sort of duplicate with 2 different mice. So I'm going to zoom in here. In that background, I'm going to hit the arrow, gradient, and we're going to set it to 2dV. And I'm going to drag up this black slider, and we're going to get a cool gradient in there. And yeah, let me set that up now. So let's hold an Alt, grab an instance. No, we don't want to hold Alt. I'm an idiot. I don't want to make it parent. We just want to select the object and grab an instance. I'm going to rotate that 180 degrees, pressing E to snap back to my axis. That's why I'm doing this, E and R. Press E, drag down. Maybe we can come out to the side here. Make sure we stay on these rigid lines here so we're not moving in any kind of funky way. And then maybe we can center these up now as 2. I'm not entirely sure about this. Maybe they should have different rotations, who knows. I think something like this could potentially look quite cool. Especially if they're inverted. That could definitely look cool. I'll leave it off for now, but I'm going to come back to that. It's set up there if we want it. I'm just going to work in the lighting, getting the render looking really, really solid. So let's come into the Octane camera, enable the camera imager, and for now we're just going to go for ACES tone mapping, which is going to disable highlight compression, disable everything here, disable us from using LUTs, but we can still use everything down here. So we're just going to use that for now. I'm just going to make our render look a lot nicer. Post-processing, we can enable that. Maybe set it to 5, doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just so it's there. A little bit of glow, a little bit of bloom. And let's go for the lighting. So, lighting already doesn't look that bad. We're on default settings for the lights. I like highlighting the right side of the mouse here. You can see what we don't want is that kind of blown out look. That's not what we want. But I wanted to go for something a little bit more vibrant this time. So with the background, let's change this up a little bit. And we can come down to the angle here and we can get this darkness kind of coming in at a slightly different angle. And that could look quite cool. We can sharpen that up a little bit. You see it's not fully representative of this box here. But the viewport's fast enough for us to figure out what we want. So we can go for something like that. And then in a HDRI, I'm going to turn on the power for now because what I'm going to mess around with is some super funky dark shadows. So I'm going to mess with the lights. Like I said, I don't totally know what I'm making here, but I want to make something slick. Something nice. And something that's easy to follow along. So if we turn back on this second mouse now, let's have a little look at that. That looks quite cool. Center these up. Now I really want to feel the length of the mouse. So let's come down to about half of that and come to about 75. Maybe not that much. 120. That'll do. And we'll stay quite close up. I kind of wanted to do some sort of lighting that I've not done in a while, which is a lot more artistic and messing with different colors and whatnot. I don't totally know how it's going to turn out, but if we come to the material and drop a color correction just before that black body emission, if we push the hue now, we can change the color of the light. I thought it might be quite interesting to leverage that. If we can get a red color. So I'm just thinking actually, if we took that value and put that in the hue here, we would change the color of these two. So I can almost use that to get the red that I want. and then bring that back. I mean, this is certainly potentially a little bit off-brand for Logitech colors. I don't know if they even do RGB products, but we can give it a go. I'm going to decrease the power a little bit. And then with the lights, let's see how these different colors look in it. So we can make this red. Now this is the good thing about Ace's tone mapping. Because we're in Ace's tone mapping, the red is going to look a lot more solid than it would do otherwise. And it also means we can slightly oversaturate it. And it's still going to look good. I'm going to add some vignetting. I'm going to overexpose it a little bit. I'm going to see how these colors look on both sides. And you see that looks pretty freaking cool. So I'm going to duplicate the background. Turn off the first one, and I'm going to mess with some red backgrounds. So let's try something like this. Now what I think's important here is that we're keeping, maybe push that a little bit, change the angle again. You can see that light is coming off quite orange, so we can maybe utilize that a little bit. I actually made some renders similar to this a couple of years ago for a project for the Valorant tournament, where I was doing this aggressive red lighting. Now if we turn off that light, stuff's looking quite cool. So I'm really just exercising art direction here. I can mess with the power of this a little bit again. I mean, the color's it's not coming up great on the emission. If we turn that off, you don't get much. Octane likes to do this with the emissions. It gets a little bit weird. A way to help it could be to desaturate. We'll come back to this light. Let's go a bit further into the red. And then with this second light, I think it's quite cool to mix the white light with it. So let's try a couple more of these. Let's bring back in the HDRI. So if we turn off the lights, let's bring back in the power of the HDRI. We can fill that in there, and then bring back on the lights. Now, if we store that, 0. We see the HDRI is filling that in. Because what I'm thinking about is what the lights aren't doing. And rather than placing another light, what can we get the HDRI to do? And I am actually going to decrease the HDRI a little bit. Let's come back now to messing with the mice themselves. And let's see now with these lights what kind of look we can get. Now we need to make sure we're looking at the main mouse, because if we're not, when we turn off the instance, things become a bit difficult. So on my Patreon, I've got a link to these LUTs, and I'm actually going to put one in quickly. I'm going to turn off Ace's tone mapping. I'm going to increase the highlight compression, and I'm going to bring down the exposure, and decrease the vignetting a little bit. I really, really like what this does to the colors. I found that the Ace is pushing a little bit too much into the orange. So these LUTs are made by Kim Amland, I believe, and they're amazing. They're really, really good. I'm going to stay on that saturation. And with that, and I think I just like sometimes using these LUTs over acetone mapping, because now we get this gamma and we can control the punchiness of the render a lot more. Let's come back here, set the saturation up. I want to decrease the power though. Something like that, it's like, it's okay. This isn't a render that I feel totally right now I would be 100% comfortable with, which is where I'm saying that, you know, I can so easily end up playing with these things for a long, long time. And usually it's not until later on that I start to get movement on something that I actually like. I think, you know, sometimes you expect to get a good looking render every single time the first time, and I think that's why it's important to just show me working and seeing what happens. I really want to go for this red look, but I am stressing both of them. I think this is quite cool. I'm going to duplicate the camera. I'm going to mess with a couple of different focal lengths. I want to see some close-ups. I'm going to turn these off in the viewport. And this is what we want, right? Is we just want some nice, clean, sharp renders that look awesome. Nothing too crazy. What I may do though is mess with some cloners or mess with something else. Let's see what on earth we can make. This looks cool. And the problem is with something like this, when you're making something floating, is it's just finding the right angle. Come on to the render settings. On a square. Duplicate it. Call it wide. Do 2560 by 1440. Slightly more cinematic angle there. Nice widescreen. Pull down a little bit. And I'm gonna cut them off. Stay super, super close in. I'm gonna bring up the exposure even more. Bring up the vignetting. Bring up the saturation, and I'm gonna warm up that light a little bit more. All the way into the red. Something like that is pretty cool, I feel like. Although the orangeness, I kept finding this, that they're slightly different colors. So moving the hue slider is you would kind of get slightly different color values between these two little lights, which I remember bugging me a little bit. A lot of this was controlled by bringing down the power. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world because there's other orange sections on it. I'm pretty happy with that. I feel like that's a pretty cool render. What I'm going to do though, just to add a little bit extra, is I'm going to drop this in a cloner, and we're going to do something similar in a cloner, but without using any takes yet. Set this up, call this G1_1, duplicate it, turn off that first one, and now let's create some different versions. Now the reason I'm setting that up now, instead of setting them up in the take, because if we create new objects in the take and then go back to this main version of the scene, is the objects won't be turned off. So I'm just going to create a couple different versions. That also looks really, really cool. So now we've done the lighting and got the scene set up and whatnot, we can play. Let's try one on its own. That has took the coordinates, that's annoying. See, one like that is even, really don't want to move that. One on its own is even really, really cool. Similar to that first one. And, you know, an angle like this with both lights red, really dope. Geo2, Geo3, duplicate again, bring it out the null. drop that in a cloner. But before we do that, make sure this is zeroed out. Then drop that into a cloner. Object, let's do radial. X, Y. Increase the radius. And let's rotate them. Duplicate the camera and zoom out. Increase the radius again. Rotate them until they look flush and cool. I'm gonna need to bring up that radius just a little bit more. Let's increase that to 6. Bring up the radius a little bit more again. Bring up the camera a little bit again. And let's mess with the rotations. Trying to figure out what I like here. You know, even something like that with the back of them is really cool. The sideways is cool. I feel like something like that flows quite nice. Sort of come in the middle maybe. And then now, let's create a take. Just call this one cloner. I'll come back to the other one. And let's move this light down. So now we've got the objects in the scene. We can kind of light a little bit to that cloner because it's kind of rare that you can make a cloner like that and all your lights are going to fit. So we can light a little bit to this. A little bit like that. I did turn on, I'll take the night in. Yeah, actually, something like that, pretty cool. That looks cool. Bring the camera in closer. Get some nice product close-ups at the bottom of the model. It looks really cool. Call that G1_1. Come in there, turn off the cloner, come back to the first one. And if we wanted to mess with the lighting again now, because I kind of like that taller lighting. A bit like that. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it there, guys. I just wanted to come in, do some lighting, say hi, make a tutorial. I'm really trying a lot harder to make tutorials without spending ages thinking about ideas. I generally won't make a tutorial until I have some sort of crazy idea or something I feel is, you know, really worth it or never been done. And I think I need to show more of my workflow and turn up and just make some renders, record it, have a good time, show you guys the ins and outs of what I do. I want to make a tutorial doing some more advanced stuff with this model, but I wanted to stylize this a bit more, use some colored lights, use some colored backgrounds, do some cool stuff. I'm pretty happy with this. I'm going to render these out, and I hope you had a good time. I hope you learned some stuff. All the resources will be in the description. Check out my Patreon. There's even more resources there, even more tutorials there, courses, whole lots of stuff. So yeah, thanks for watching this one, guys. Thanks for turning up to this one. I do appreciate it. I want to make more tutorials like this. I want to get comfortable making tutorials like this, so I do appreciate it. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you very soon for another Cinema 4D tutorial. Maybe Redshift, maybe Octane, who knows.